Welcome in to KCTV5 Plus 2025 Rewind. I'm Katie Bird, and today I'll be taking you down memory lane with the biggest stories that shaped Kansas City this year. And there's a lot to get into, so let's jump into it. Well, Kansas City, we started this year off with a bang, or should I say a burr. The blizzard of January 5th and 6th swept through the entire country and smacked the metro right in its path. Historic snowfall was recorded at KCI, and snow totals passed 10 inches across Kansas and Missouri. Over in West Topeka, a whopping 17 inches of snow was recorded. Not only was the snow knee-high in some places, but the temperatures were bitterly cold. Mix that with ice accumulation before the snow, and you have a recipe for quite a mess. Thousands were stuck with nowhere to go as the blizzard forced Kansas City International Airport to cancel flights, and most of the city was forced to live like true northerners. Here in Kansas City, we're resilient though, and what's a little snow to kick off 2025? And on January 13th, Missouri welcomed a new governor. Mike Kehoe was sworn in as the 58th governor of the Show Me State. He signed 6 executive orders aimed at reducing crime just minutes after being sworn in. And on January 20th, Donald Trump, America's 45th president, was also inaugurated as the nation's 47th president. Taking it next to January 29th, 2025, an American Airlines flight out of Wichita took off for the nation's capital with 64 passengers and crew members around dinner time. The flight cruised without issue for over 1,000 miles, but the night took a harrowing turn when an Army Black Hawk helicopter practicing emergency evacuation routes collided with the flight at around 8 p.m. Central Time, causing an explosion and sending remnants of what was left into the Potomac River. No one survived, and instead, Kansas City's neighbors in Wichita were forced to cope with the tragedy. Among the victims were talented figure skaters, Kansans, and people just like me and you. The rare crash caused flight cancellations from Kansas City to D.C. until about noon the next day. It was a tragedy that sent shockwaves throughout the entire United States, and it was also the deadliest plane crash on American soil in over 2 decades. Fast forward to February 6th, it was an exciting day, especially for those in New Orleans, Louisiana, kicking off an exhilarating few days ahead of Super Bowl 59. Chiefs fans from near and far came to cheer on the Chiefs, and those relaying the latest updates from the Bayou to Kansas City were the reporters and anchors covering all things Chiefs fans and that unique Louisiana culture. Adon Manzano was among those covering the game for Telemundo KC, the Metro Spanish network. Manzano was an anchor and reporter, eager to cover the Chiefs and Eagles matchup. February 6 took a tragic turn when it was announced that Manzano was found dead in his hotel room. Kansas Cityans and Chiefs fans everywhere were left shocked and confused. How could this happen? It was the worst possible scenario for what was meant to be a week full of anticipation, and the days and weeks after Manzano's death were filled with mourning and tribute. Since then, charges were filed against multiple people in relation to Manzano's death. And just a day after Manzano's death, on February 7th, One Liberty Mexican restaurant was shaken following the removal of multiple employees by the Department of Homeland Security. KCTV started getting phone calls, and then a post after post about the removals on social media came flooding in, and one Metro man, John Costa, a customer, got it all on video, as you can see right here on your screen. And in fact, the agents were still at the restaurant when customers arrived to have lunch. The restaurant, however, it stayed open following the raid, and the general manager said the chain had actually moved employees from other locations to help cover these shifts. Many customers, employees, and community members were left with more questions than answers about this raid. And later in the year, a federal judge ruled that the nearly dozen U.S. immigration, customs, and enforcement arrests at this restaurant were unlawful. And on February 9th, our Kansas City Chiefs were on a mission for a three-peat. The players' determination could be felt hundreds of miles away to do something that had never been done before in NFL history. You could truly feel the energy all the way from New Orleans. But of course, we all know how this game ended up. The Eagles denied the Chiefs a Super Bowl three-peat, and it was a tough watch for Kansas Cityans as they witnessed a 40-22 loss against Philadelphia. And while a Super Bowl trip may not be in the cards this season, there's still a lot of success over the years to, of course, be celebrated right here in Chiefs Kingdom. Taking it all the way next to March 27th, Kansas City's manager Brian Platt was fired by Mayor Q and the city council. The decision came after a jury's finding that Platt had encouraged staff to lie to the media following a lawsuit involving former communications director Chris Hernandez, ineffectiveness of handling personnel matters, and failure to effectively establish goals for the department. The firing came just 3 weeks after Platt was suspended without pay. He had initially started as the manager in December of 2020 before extending his contract in May of 2024. Platt was replaced in May by Mario Vasquez. And since then, Kansas City has reached a settlement with Platt, and the initial terms were not disclosed by the city. And next up, Lexington, Missouri is a small Missouri town with a whole lot of Midwest charm. With a population of less than 5,000 people, it's a place where tragedy is almost unheard of. But that all changed on April 9th. Crews working on a fiber line installation mistakenly hit a gas line, and 2 hours later, a home exploded. It killed a 5-year-old child and seriously injured 2 others. Multiple homes around it were also damaged. Since then, crews in Lexington have worked to map underground gas mains to prevent another tragedy that took this young child's life. And next up, you may remember this footage from the night of March 17th, 2025. Smoke was reported at the Kansas City Tesla Center when a gray Cybertruck parked in the dealership lot caught fire. Investigators later found a Molotov cocktail near the burning vehicle. Flames spread and damaged a second Cybertruck and 2 nearby charging stations. It caused thousands of dollars in damage to the vehicles. Over a month later, on April 18th, authorities say they finally identified and arrested a suspect, who was 19-year-old Owen McIntyre. McIntyre is a Kansas City resident who was attending college in Boston. The FBI led the investigation with help from the ATF and local police. McIntyre made an initial court appearance in Massachusetts following his arrest, but since then, his case has been delayed by 1 year. He's now set to appear in court on August 10th, 2026. Just after midnight on April 27th, a routine Kansas City Fire Department call turned dark. Just after 12:30 a.m., officials responded to the area of North Oak and 152 due to reports of a woman walking on the highway. Callers were concerned for her safety. The woman, identified as Shanetta Bossel, was mid-transport to St. Luke's for medical attention when the unthinkable happened. Bossel pulled out a knife and stabbed 29-year-old firefighter and paramedic Graham Hoffman in the heart. Chaos unfolded as the ambulance stopped on the side of the road, and Graham's coworkers, they rushed him to St. Luke's North Hospital, where he later died from his injuries. Bossel was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, armed criminal action, third-degree assault of a special victim, and resisting arrest. The Kansas City community was heartbroken in the sudden loss of Graham Hoffman. His friends and family described him as a genuine soul and a leader on and off the job. He was the kind of person who always wanted to learn and get better. Days later, on May 2nd, Graham Hoffman was laid to rest. His services were held at Pleasant Valley Baptist Church before a procession took him to Station 42 for one last ride. It was a somber day, one that emphasized the fragility of life. Hoffman has since been honored by numerous organizations for his strength and selflessness. Fast forward to May 22nd, 2025. It started as a clear, warm day in Washington, D.C. Israeli embassy staffers had just wrapped up a day at the young diplomat's reception at the Capitol Jewish Museum when the unthinkable happened. A man approached their group and opened fire. 26-year-old Kansas City native Sarah Milgram and her partner were fatally shot in what investigators described as a deeply disturbing anti-Semitic attack. Milgram was born and raised in the Kansas City metro. She graduated from Shawnee Mission East before graduating from the University of Kansas in 2021. She was described as a warm and compassionate human, committed to peace building. The shooting shook the local Jewish community and stirred mourning across the nation. It caused leaders to call for solidarity in the face of violence. And on May 31st, a Kansas City television legend retired. After nearly 30 incredible years, KCTV5's very own Carolyn Long hung up her anchoring hat. Carolyn started her journey at Channel 5 back in 1996. She was quickly promoted to the anchor desk, and she was always ready to report the news. It was clear she was a natural from the beginning. And from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, Long supported Kansas City through it all. And she has left an indelible mark on her colleagues and the entire Kansas City community. June 11th, 2025 marked exactly 1 year until the World Cup begins right here on Kansas City soil. A giant countdown clock was unveiled at Union Station, and Chiefs owner Clark Hunt and other Kansas City royalty attended the milestone marker.
The countdown to the FIFA World Cup 26 in Kansas City begins today.
You may remember June 14th as one of this decade's largest organized nationwide protests, the No Kings protests. Thousands of Kansas Cityans gathered at multiple spots throughout the metro, holding signs and protesting against what organizers describe as President Trump's authoritarian policies. For many, it was personal as they used their democratic rights to allow their voices to be heard. No Kings organizers said that 60,000 people across Missouri and 17,000 in Kansas City alone attended protests on that day. And on the 4th of July, KCTV5 celebrated at the annual Stars and Stripes picnic. KCTV5 broadcast the city's largest fireworks display at the World War I Memorial. And the next day, on July 5th, an investigation began after an inmate death at the Wyandotte County Jail. 50-year-old Charles L. Adair died a day after he was arrested on misdemeanor warrants. Since then, Wyco Sheriff's Deputy Richard Fatherly was placed on unpaid leave after the state of Kansas coroner's report ruled Adair's death as a homicide. Fatherly has been charged with second-degree murder in Adair's death. Adair's family and friends have continuously spoken out calling for his justice, and they're now seeking a $25 million settlement. And a judge is now set to decide in April if Fatherly will face trial in this case. And on July 26, Kansas City suffered a devastating loss when Wyandotte County Deputy Elijah Ming was shot and later died while responding to what began as a domestic assistance call. Officials say a woman called the Kansas City, Kansas police at around 3:30 p.m. asking for help as she moved out of a home. She reported a man inside had threatened her with a gun. Deputy Ming and a Kansas City, Kansas police officer arrived at the residence at about 3:45 p.m. As the two walked to the front door, the man inside began shooting. The Kansas City, Kansas officer was not injured, but Deputy Ming was struck. Additional officers converged on the scene and exchanged multiple rounds of gunfire with the suspect and worked to render aid to Ming, who later died at a nearby hospital. The suspect was later identified as 38-year-old Sean Harris. Harris had barricaded himself inside the home for about an hour, but surrendered to negotiators at around 5 p.m. He was shot and injured at some point during the standoff, treated at a hospital and released the next day, and then arrested on a charge of capital murder of a law enforcement officer and booked into the Johnson County Jail. Deputy Ming served with the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Office for nearly 9 years. Sheriff Daniel Soptic described him as a loved member of the department and said Ming gave his life serving Wyandotte County and all of its residents. Officials and community leaders expressed profound grief. Kansas City, Kansas Mayor Tyrone Garner called the shooting senseless, unnecessary violence and said the city would stand in solidarity with Ming's family and fellow officers. Deputy Ming was later laid to rest on Monday, August 11th at Children's Mercy Park. On August 24th, a normal weekend night in Kansas City's entertainment district turned deadly. It happened at around 3:30 in the morning, less than 2 blocks from the T-Mobile Center. Authorities responded to the area after reports of multiple gunshots in a parking lot. Officers found one man dead on the scene and a second taken to the hospital and died a few hours later. 3 were hospitalized, a juvenile boy, a man, and a woman. And residents in nearby high-rise buildings reported hearing dozens of gunshots and later saw bullet holes at nearby businesses and apartments. The shooting caused city leaders, including Mayor Quentin Lucas and Councilman Crispin Rea, to speak up on the city's violence and new potential safety measures. August 26, 2025. The day started out tough. Exactly 1 month after the tragic death of Kansas City, Kansas deputy Elijah Ming, the city was hit with another loss. Officer Hunter Simoncic was killed in the line of duty. He was deliberately struck by a car during a police chase. He was deploying stop sticks near 75th and State Avenue in an attempt to halt a fleeing vehicle when the suspect reportedly drove over the sticks across a median and directly into the officer before continuing his escape. 31-year-old Dennis Mitchell was responsible. Mitchell crashed his truck approximately 2.5 miles away and was later treated at a hospital before being released into the custody of the Wyandotte County Jail, facing charges including first-degree murder. Kansas City, Kansas Police Chief Oakman expressed his dismay at this calculated nature of the act, noting the dangers that these officers face daily. This tragedy marked the second line-of-duty death for Kansas City, Kansas in just 30 days, of course, following the death of Elijah Ming on July 26. As the day went on, the city was still grappling with the loss of Officer Simoncic. That same day, however, Kansas City's royal couple announced their engagement. It was a simple social media post that shocked the world. One of the world's biggest pop icons made it Instagram official through a clever caption stating that your English teacher and your gym teacher were getting married. Kansas City, of course, was buzzing with excitement as the Metro realized Kansas City would soon get its own spin of a royal wedding. And right away here at KCTV, we even started making our own predictions of Taylor and Travis's big day. Who's on the invite list? Will Travis call it a career? Fast forward a few months, much of this is still unknown. And, since the Chiefs aren't making it to the playoffs this year, at least we can distract ourselves with the fact that Taylor Swift is marrying a Chiefs player. I mean, how cool is that? And again, this was a day of two extremes here in the KCTV5 newsroom. The extreme elation we felt for Travis and Taylor can't, of course, be compared to the heartbreak of losing Officer Simoncic in the line of duty. After 24 years, 8,760 days of darkness to be exact, on September 18th, the KCTV5 tower was relit. It was a day that will go down in the Metro's history forever. Years of requests and countless hours of work went into the project. A specialized crew spent months installing these lights, and of course, on the night of Thursday, September 18th, it all came to life as Mayor Quentin Lucas flipped the switch, marking a new era for Kansas City. And the month of September ended in a rather big way, especially for those living in Jackson County, Missouri. You may remember September 30th as the day that Jackson County voters overwhelmingly voted to recall Executive Frank White with over 64,000 votes. That was over 85% of voters. This came after earlier in the summer when more than 43,000 signatures were turned in to get a recall election on the ballot. The effort to boot Frank out began, though, back in 2024 after numerous complaints about reassessment values on community members' homes and properties. The cries for a recall grew louder after White backed an effort to vote down a sales tax extension to fund stadium projects for the Kansas City Chiefs and Royals. The stadium sales tax extension would have raised about $1.7 billion over 40 years to fund a new baseball park for the Royals in the East Crossroads and for the Chiefs to renovate Arrowhead Stadium or build an entirely new facility. We all know how that's played out for our Kansas City Chiefs, but I won't get ahead of myself here. Frank White made a statement that night, in part saying that serving as the executive was one of the greatest honors of his life, going on to say that while questions remained about the process that led to the election, he will move forward guided by gratitude for all this community has given and the drive to do what is right. And fast forward just a couple weeks to October 13th, an interim executive was chosen to take Frank White's spot. That appointed interim Phil Lavoda was sworn in after the county's first ever recall. Lavoda entered the office with a message to restore trust between the community and the administration. He will fill White Jr.'s tenure until January 1st, 2027. And taking it next to November, thousands of voters on both sides of the state line made their way to the polls for Election Day in one of the biggest races you may remember as the Kansas City, Kansas mayoral election. Two influential women won the primary elections back in August for the KCK mayoral race. Those women, none other than Crystal Watson and Rose Mulvaney Henry. In this election, it was a close race, and throughout the night here on KCTV5, we tracked the results as they rolled in, and in the end, Watson came out on top with 54% of votes. Her leadership experience in the metro propelled her. It includes previously being the CEO of the Heartland Black Chamber of Commerce and serving on the KCK School Board. She officially replaced outgoing Mayor Tyrone Garner on December 15th, and part of Watson's campaign centered around economic development, small business growth, and relief for homeowners. And Watson is the first Black woman to serve as the mayor of Kansas City, Kansas. And a day later, on November 5th, the government shutdown reached 36 days, which was the longest in our country's history. And I'd venture to say that right here in Kansas City, it would be difficult to find someone who at least didn't know a community member impacted by it. From furloughs to SNAP benefits not received, it was a challenging time in the community. Pile that with the approaching holidays, and it was an uncertain and difficult time for many, to say the least. But the great thing about Kansas City is that we know how to band together and help those who need it. Countless Kansas Citians and organizations lended out a helping hand. Next up, we kicked off December in a big way. Not only was the first of the month the first snow of this winter, was also the day that sports betting became legal in Missouri. Fans in the Show Me State were finally able to place legal wagers at casinos and through mobile apps on their favorite sports teams. It was a big win for many who no longer had to drive across to the Sunflower State to place bets on their favorite athletes. December 6th was the day the World Cup cities were announced. That's right. That's the day the Metro discovered which nations would be coming for the World Cup with the final draw. It was a day full of suspense and excitement for soccer fans around the nation. And lucky for us here in the Metro, we get a taste of cultures from around the world. Argentina, Algeria, Ecuador, Curacao, Tunisia, Netherlands, and Austria are all playing right here in Kansas City in the summer of 2026. Shameless plug here on your KCTV5 news app. We actually have a World Cup to Kansas City page where you can learn all things soccer and entertainment ahead of the big matches coming this summer. Taking it next to Friday, December 12th, over in DeSoto, Kansas, when news broke that the largest electric vehicle battery plant in the nation was on lockdown. At first, there were many unknowns as community members had many questions. What happened? Was there an active threat? And as the hours grew, the questions started to get answered. Dispatch had learned of a stabbing at the Panasonic battery plant just before 11 a.m. that day. Dispatch had learned of a stabbing at the Panasonic battery plant just before 11 a.m. that day. And when they arrived, they found a victim with multiple stab wounds. When law enforcement found the suspect, there was a brief interaction that resulted in an officer firing their weapon, striking the suspect. The victim, on the other hand, was taken to an area hospital with critical injuries. No members of law enforcement suffered injuries in the incident, and the sheriff did not comment on what initially led up to the stabbing. And Sunday, December 14th, ended in heartbreak in Chiefs Kingdom in more ways than one. It was a home matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers, and quarterback Patrick Mahomes suffered an injury late in the fourth quarter. He needed help getting to the locker room, as you can see here on your screen. Later, the world found out that it was a season-ending ACL tear. And if that wasn't painful enough for Kansas City, it was also the loss that sealed the Chiefs' postseason fate. That's right. For the first time in 10 seasons, the Chiefs were mathematically eliminated from the postseason. The tragic and unusual ending of this season can't take away from the fact that the Chiefs actually held the NFL's longest active postseason streak, entering the day at 10 years. On Monday, December 22nd, the news broke. Chiefs leaders and lawmakers gathered in Topeka as lawmakers unanimously approved a star bonds proposal, clearing the way for the Chiefs to cross state lines into Kansas. Governor Laura Kelly also announced that the team would build a headquarters and training facility in Olathe. And some of the biggest news to ever come out of Chiefs Kingdom obviously came with some very mixed emotions. Some people were excited to be out with the old and in with the new, but others, they're not ready to say goodbye to the tradition and decades of memories at the loudest stadium in the world. But of course, we don't have to bid our farewell to the Chiefs' current home just yet. Red Kingdom won't be showing out to the new Wyandotte County Dome Stadium until 2031. And even though the locations of the Chiefs Stadium may change, one thing will forever remain. That's the decades of memories made at the loudest stadium in the world. Kansas City, what a year it's been through the highs and lows that 2025 has brought. Here at KCTV5, we're thankful to have been there through every step of the way. And I have a feeling 2026 may be another milestone year here in the Metro. Kansas City, have a happy new year.